Hello and welcome to another Melbourne AWS user group. It's now March in the year of 2021, which means we have been doing these online events for almost 12 months. Obviously, 12 months ago was a bit of turmoil, so we actually cancelled our March meetup from 2020. So we've actually been doing it for 11 months. Hopefully we don't need to hit 12 months, but who knows at this stage. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we get through the introductions. So let's kick off and get underway. If my slides would appear. Right. This is our agenda for the evening. If you're new around here, this is your first time watching one of our online events, welcome. What I'm doing now is just running through the introductions. We will then have Ian and friends. I believe we're joined today by Guy Morton. We'll run through the news, or what's new in AWS since last month. And then we have two great presentations tonight. Mark will take us through using AWS Cognito in your product. And then after the very short break, Tony will take us through deploying a .NET application through ECS Fargate with AWS CDK. I'm sure he could have fit some more acronyms into that, but we'll keep it short for now. We'll probably wrap up around 7:45 tonight, and then we have a small Zoom catch-up. If anybody wants to jump in on that, the link will be posted into Slack. So the format for tonight, if you're new around, we encourage you to ask questions, especially ask questions of our presenter. You can do that in the in the Melbourne channel on Slack, or just in any channel really, using the AWS Melb hashtag on Twitter, or right there in the chat on YouTube. And then at the end of the presentations, myself or my co-host Ian will jump on the stream and we'll ask the presenter any questions on your behalf. We also encourage and really welcome any feedback you might have via the same three channels. Just feel free to chat in general, or ask any questions or provide any feedback, anything you like. All comments are welcome. Now, as we have been doing this for a while, but our sponsors haven't changed. So we do like to say a big thank you to Enabler, our gold sponsor, for their continued support throughout 2020 and 2021 now. And to our three silver sponsors, AC3, CMD, and Do It International. Without the support of our sponsors, there's no way we would have been able to continue to put these events on throughout lockdown. And we look forward to their support when we do eventually just come out of lockdown. So a quick note on who we are. My name is Rob. I usually go by @Bok on all of the usual social media places. And on Slack, my co-host who you'll meet in a moment is Ian, who goes by @Ian. Ian and I don't work for AWS. In fact, none of our core contributors work for AWS. We're a community-run organization, which means we welcome all opinions. We don't have to be nice with our opinions around AWS products and services. We can be open and honest. So if you wanted to come in and say that Azure is better at some things than AWS, we're happy to have those sorts of conversations, and we welcome that sort of input. The best place to have that sort of input or have those sorts of conversations is on our Slack team. We have a fairly large Slack team. I think we're at 600 or 700 members now, of whom, there's 10% or so of those are active during the normal workday. So it's a great place to ask any questions you have if you need help. Great place to complain about AWS too, which happens a lot in general. But there are also some specialist channels like our jobs channel if you're looking for work or you're looking to hire. There's a volunteers channel if you'd like to get involved in helping out. And then there are two automated channels, one for AWS outages and one for announcements. The outages channel in particular gets pretty busy whenever there's something going on in AP Southeast too. But it's not just on Slack that you can get involved. We're always looking for speakers. Finding speakers is probably the hardest part of putting these events on. We're not looking for sponsors right now, but we are always looking for volunteers as well if you'd like to help out in any way. There's jobs big and small that need to be doing. Now, so the question I guess we need to start asking is whether we want to start returning to in-person events. So we're going to drop a poll into Slack And if you are interested in returning to in-person events, please make sure you jump on Slack and vote. Or if you prefer to stay to online events, please let us know that too. We're not going to want to put in the effort to try and secure the venue and organize events if there's actually no interest for people returning to in-person events yet. I mean, not everybody's back in the office, even though I know some companies are starting to get a bit more pushy in making people go back to the office. Yes, the poll will go into Slack either during the event tonight or tomorrow. We'll see how we go with that. Now, there's one. Normally, this is the part of the night where I talk about the other events that are upcoming. But when I went looking for other events that are upcoming, the peakings are actually pretty slim. Though I hear there are some new events and groups being set up in the next little while, which will be good. But what I did find was this one. It's a brand new group called AWS Melbourne. And normally I don't call out other groups, but this one looks like it's more of a data harvesting scam than it is an actual group. It's the same organizer who is actually located in India, according to their bio, has other groups called AWS Sydney, AWS Ottawa, different groups around the country or around the world. And all of their events that they post are actually hosted behind either a paywall or a data capture portal. So it doesn't look like they're actually really posting any events. They're just reposting webinars and trying to capture your data. So I thought I'd call that one out just as a general warning to double check, who you're giving your personal information to before you do. They have been reported to the meetup.com just in case, but yeah. Okay, and on that note, let's throw over to our news.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Rob, for the intro. So, time for the news. As you can see below me here, we've got Guy. So, say hi, Guy.
Hi, everyone. How you going? You can't tell me how you're going, but I want to know. Send a message in the chat.
Yep. Cool. As always, we'll start with what we finally got in Sydney. We've actually got a fair amount of things. First, it's always good to call out new Australian heroes. In this case, it's Zainab Maleki. She's from Perth and community hero, and she's run various coding programs for children, which is really cool.
Yeah, good. Welcome.
And Guy, I know you were really happy about the next one.
Well, I just obviously, I always like it when AWS brings out a product with a good name, and Snowcone's got a great name. So Snowcone is it's a member of their Snow family. She goes all the way from Snowcone up to Snowmobile, which is your container truck. The Snowcone is a device that's, what does it weigh? It's 4.5 pounds worth of goodness. It's about, it's about yo big. It's about sort of Apple TV size, I guess, if you know what that looks like. Oh, the old Apple TV, sorry. I'm going back a few years now. So it's a device with a couple of CPUs, 4 gig of memory, 8 terabytes of storage and wired networking, and you can run edge compute on it, as well as use it as a storage device, and you can essentially use it for IoT type applications. Collect all your data on it and send it back to AWS, or you can use it you can stream the data back to AWS as well. So yeah, very handy if you've got sort of mobile data collection you need to do. It can run on a battery as well as on power. So it's sort of designed to be a edge device.
That's cool.
But just don't buy the yellow ones. Don't buy the yellow ones. It's all right. It's a joke.
Not a very good one, but cool. Other things we've got now is the ability to run EMR on EKS. This means you can run a lot of different EMR clusters of different versions on the same hardware, which can definitely have some cost savings.
Yep.
D3 instances. So obviously once in a while we get new instance types. These are really built around data storage.
Yeah.
If you need them, you're probably very familiar with them. You were saying?
Yeah, and these ones have got 45% higher disk throughput compared to D2 instances and 2.5 times the networking speed. So if you're on D2 instances, you may want to transition to these ones.
Yep. Generally, always transition to the newer instances because they're faster and cheaper.
Yep.
And the last one is a bit of a weird one. We already had client VPN, but it's now available in extra availability zones. Basically, you can build a more redundant setup now.
And it counts, but it's not that interesting.
But then let's move on to the more interesting things. Start with serverless and S3 object Lambda.
Yeah, this is really neat, isn't it? It's like Lambda at Edge, but for S3. So it puts Lambda essentially in a access point sandwich between your S3 bucket. There's an access point, then there's Lambda, and then there's another Lambda access point that you use to access your object Lambda. And so you can write a Lambda function that sits in between those two access points essentially and translates your object into something else. So you can enrich a data object, you can do transformations and so forth. Anything you can do in Lambda basically that you can do in an object you can store in S3.
Yeah, that's really cool, really powerful. I would suggest don't use it too much for objects that you constantly have to pull, mostly because then it might start costing a bit more than if you just prepare it beforehand.
Yeah, but it's probably going to simplify some architectures where previously you might have had to put an API gateway in and a Lambda function to fetch an object and then process it and return it. You can now use this S3. You can use S3 commands to use this to bypass all that. You don't need to have any of that.
Yeah, no. Really cool.
And even cooler is the step functions stuff. Support for YAML. So now you can write your state machines in YAML instead of the accursed JSON format, which I'm currently battling with. It's just a much nicer language to put those sorts of things together in. So that's an awesome step forward. Yep. And obviously you already mentioned EMR on EKS, so you can essentially use step functions now. It's got an integration with EMR on EKS, so you can use you can basically trigger that as part of a step function state machine now. So you can use it to spin up a cluster, run your jobs, shut the cluster back down again, all within the context of a step functions flow. So that's pretty neat.
It is indeed. Also, just calling out RDS proxy. We've mentioned this in the past as well. A proxy layer between, for example, mostly your Lambda functions and RDS. You can now use a single proxy to have connections to RDSs in multiple VPCs, which simplifies, again, some setups, and it's pretty cool.
Yep. Very neat.
Then on the container side, this is a good new feature is ECS exec. Basically, what this allows you to do is similar to Systems Manager. Systems Manager, Session Manager. which rolls off the tongue so nicely.
Mm-hmm.
It allows you to basically do a Docker exec type thing straight into your containers, which is really neat when you need it. One use case I can see for it is using it for temporary bastion or test Fargate instances. Just spin a Fargate instance up, ECS exec into it, and you can connect to various things in your account, in your VPC.
Cool.
AKS cluster, faster creation, great. I wouldn't mind if it went even faster. Still takes long.
And the are you excited about Red Hat on AWS, Ian?
So DevOps.
It's funny. I do have a story about that because I actually did some investigation of running OpenShift on AWS last year, and it was hella expensive. So I don't know how. I know that in this it's a sort of a joint venture with Red Hat and AWS bills you, but obviously you still need a Red Hat account to run it, and I don't know how much more affordable it is. Hopefully much more affordable than the sort of OpenShift on AWS stack that you had to create previously, which was lots and lots of beefy EC2 instances in a cluster. But anyway, let's talk about DevOps, because you just did itching to get onto Credo, aren't you, Ian? Hi, Chris.
We are obligated to mention Credo every time anything about it is mentioned. New version, yay. What I am really happy about is the SSL credential profile support in Visual Studio Code, as that is my editor of choice. Now I can actually use the AWS plugin when I'm working for clients that use SSL.
Yeah, I was a bit. I really couldn't work this out because I thought I'd been doing that for a little while, but maybe there's some detailing here that I'm missing. But I've been using SSO with Visual Studio Code for ages. Is this something different?
You couldn't use it. Didn't support credentials for, but maybe you were on a beta or something. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I did update it recently, so maybe it was. Yeah. Anyway, Proton.
Yeah,
Proton.
it's a bunch of things, but looking at the time, I think
we skip over it. Yeah.
Yeah. On security side, ACM certificate expiry monitoring is really nice. Obviously, this doesn't matter for self-renewing certificates, but if you upload a certificate, it is good if you can get a notification about that.
Yeah, you get a warning so that your IT people can ignore it. That's what I always find. Anyway, it's secrets manager replication, that's going to be handy to other regions. So that will allow you to replicate your secrets out to multiple regions and have everything managed in the central original region. It'll manage the synchronization of your secrets out to the other regions. So that's neat.
Yep. When we all go multi-region in a year and a half.
That's right. Exactly. We'll need it, won't we? Sydney, Melbourne. Yep, for the win. Yep.
And the access analyzer validation, what's it called? This can validate your
policies.
IAM policies and tell you what's good and not.
Yep. CloudTrail logging of data events. So it's similar to what you can do for S3. You've got to turn it on for S3 data events. You can log them to a CloudTrail. Now you can do that with Dynamo as well. And with the security hub thing in Macy, that's automatically ingesting sensitive data findings from Macy can now be ingested into Security Hub. So you can use that to operationalize the notifications from Macy regarding sensitive data. So you could Anyway, let's move on.
Some other cool stuff. Fault injection simulator is for chaos engineering, basically chaos engineering as a service. You can inject issues in your environment.
Yeah, so you can turn off EC2 instances, you can change ECS, EKS, RDS. So those are the services that are supported today. So basically you can reboot things, shut them down unexpectedly and all that sort of stuff. You can also stop an experiment based on CloudWatch alarms. So if things are suddenly going horribly wrong, you can stop your experiment as well. If everyone starts crying, for instance, that's probably a good time to stop.
Yep. Osaka is now real region. That's cool.
Yep.
And another one mentioned this morning, many people might not have much use for it, but the EC2 serial console, which allows you to basically log into the boot process of your instances before they have any network connection. There's a lot of little things that make this harder to use, but when you're debugging some things, it might turn out to be useful.
Yep.
So,
do you want to just mention the Aurora instance, Graviton 2 instances quickly? They're saying that's available. Graviton 2 is available for both flavors, Postgres and MySQL. They're saying 20% performance improvement and up to 35% price performance improvement, depending on the database size. So get amongst the old Graviton. We're big fans.
We are. Cool. Now, we're out of time here. But as we've mentioned before, we have a podcast running as well, where Guy, Jam, and I discuss all the news in a lot more detail for a longer time. You can listen to that, or you can try this new podcast that I started by myself, which is called Arjen Without Sleep, where I talk my newborn daughter into sleep by talking about boring stuff like AWS.
Awesome.
And with that, I'll hand it back to Rob. Thank you all. And bye.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Guy. I'm particularly looking forward to the AWS podcast because I too have been having trouble sleeping lately. This should be good. I have to take my headphones to bed with me because I don't think it will go down well with my partner. But anyway, I already get called boring enough without listening to that sort of thing in bed. Okay, so time for our first presentation. Mark, if you're able to start sharing your screen now, while I find where my notes are. So Mark has worked with AWS professionally for the last 8 years, firstly in startups and then as a consultant at Versant. He was an AWS Premier Consulting Partner. He's also an AWS Partner Ambassador, and currently the lead engineer at Stacks. So if Mark can share your screen. Not seeing a screen being shared just yet. There we go. All right, now I'm confused. Which screen am I looking at? This one. All right. Looks like Mark's ready, so we'll switch over to that now.
No worries. Hello, everyone. So today I'm just going to be having a bit of a run through on sort of giving people an introduction and a bit of an overview of using AWS Cognito in your product. So I've been using AWS Cognito for a few years now, and basically just wanted to sort of pull together a resource for sort of onboarding people. So I've kind of combined a few just highlights and things that I like to call out to people I work with, along with a bit of an overview of some of the features, and try and provide a bunch of links as well. So yeah, as I've said, my name's Mark Wolf. I'm an engineering lead at Stacks, and of course we are hiring, even in the middle of a pandemic. And yeah, basically, if you've got any feedback or anything like that, you can contact me on Twitter, or hit me up on GitHub. I've got heaps of open source stuff there, and there's a bunch of projects that I post in and around Cognito as well. So what I'm going to pretty much do is just run through a bit of an overview of Cognito, and then dive a bit into the product, and a bit of the obligatory section on security, because everyone knows that's very important, especially at the moment, with a lot of people working online and all that sort of stuff. A bit about managing Cognito, a little bit about integration, and hopefully a little bit about multi-tenancy as well, if we have time. So from the AWS Cognito website, basically they sum it up, and this is a quote from their site, as a simple and secure user sign up, sign in, and access control. Now, they raise a range of points around security, which I absolutely appreciate with Cognito. It is hands down, their dedication to security is number one, and scalable. Up to millions of users. I think it's 40 million users in a pool. They have some integration with Social Enterprise Federation, and really for the companies or the organizations I've worked with, which are mainly enterprise or companies that are working with enterprise, the PCI and SOC 2 certifications are really, really important. And they integrate a lot with standards-based identity across a range of different products. So in this particular area, there's a lot of jargon and a lot of terminology that you really have to come up to speed with if you're going to work with Cognito beyond the basics. So what I normally try and do is, I've got a link in my slides. There's basically a few presentations online. This one's an hour, which is really just getting started with Amazon Cognito, just to give you an overview of some of this terminology and stuff like that. In this particular presentation, I'm going to focus a bit more on the sort of the back end of it and the integration side, and a little bit less on the bigger picture or the use of it and integration with services. So pretty much just as a simple overview, for those of you who haven't used Cognito, it basically provides a few core resources. One of them, and the central one, is probably the Cognito user pool. It allows you to store users, which are effectively people and or service accounts. So people do use it for service accounts. You can, basically it's a username and password. Anyone who's worked in a large organization has seen a lot of service accounts. You can use it for storing groups. They have a concept of clients or application clients, which are very similar to the OAuth clients, pretty much the same sort of thing, although their APIs for authentication are a little bit different. You have a domain where you can basically host, or you can use something called hosted UI. I'm not going to touch on that tonight. I'm just going to basically go through or breeze through that because that's a whole separate presentation unto itself. You have this concept of identity providers, which hooks into the hosted UI, which is, again, basically enabling the federation of either social or enterprise sort of IDPs or identity providers. And then you've got this concept of resource servers, which is more of a OAuth sort of concept. Another part of it is Cognito identity pools. And really the thing that you need to understand about these is they kind of act as a bridge into the AWS security system, so the IAM system or product. And there's pretty much two components that you are able to configure within that pool amongst other settings. And they're really the callouts are there's an unauthenticated IAM role and an authenticated IAM role. And you can basically provide a level of access before and after authentication to services that you may want to expose within your AWS account. And during authentication, there's a hook where you can actually customize the roles if you need to. They may be per role or per basically around RBAC, role-based access control. So for anyone who's done a bit of work with databases, I kind of put together just a high-level diagram just showing the relationship between the entities. Now, really the core is, as we can see, the pool is at the center, and then we can have one or more clients, application clients. We can have one or more identity providers, and we can basically have groups and users, and basically they can be many to many. Now, diving into this and using the product is just giving you a little bit of an overview of sort of what entities you'll mainly be interacting with. But there are quite a few extra resources and detail when you start digging in. So on the security side, basically one of the reasons why a lot of organizations will use this particular product is, like a lot of the Amazon products, hosted services or managed services, is basically compliance. So out of the box, you get PCI and SOC. And really, the value there is you can delegate a lot of that responsibility for compliance to Amazon. And that makes your certification, if you're looking to achieve those compliance levels, a lot easier. It doesn't make it simple, but it does make it a little bit easier. And really, Amazon is worried about and managing a lot of the constraints around secure storage, brute force attacks. All of that is managed by Amazon, which is, for me, a very, very important part, because as an engineer and having done operations for a lot of years, the last thing I want to be doing is waking up at 2 a.m. because someone's smashing a service. And a lot of that is managed by Amazon. It has MFA support, either via SMS, which I don't recommend, or TOTP. And it has built-in rate limiting, and it's highly available, which is super handy, fault tolerant, scalable, and it's managed by AWS. Now, what I've done is I've sort of pulled out a bit of a CloudFormation template just to go over sort of the high-level configuration or build of a particular service. In this particular template, we have a user pool. Basically, the email address is used as the username. There's a small schema. Really, this is just the basics. Typically you'll have a lot more in a production system, but this is a good starting point. And then we have a client, and pretty much, as I was mentioning, an unauthenticated role and an authenticated role. And this particular gist it's public, so if you want to have a look and provide feedback and stuff like that, it's pretty much something that I use to help people get started. So if we go back to the slides. So one of the big things that I use pretty much as soon as I set up a pool is the Lambda triggers. So Amazon provides a range of different triggers. The two callouts that you pretty much use just to get started are the pre-sign up trigger, which can be used to validate, say, an invite code. If you want to be able to reject a sign up for Cognito, you can use the pre-sign up Lambda trigger. And if that trigger returns an error, that user won't be allowed to sign up. So there's quite a few triggers now. So I definitely recommend you dive in, and I've provided a couple of links there. Also, the pre-token generation Lambda trigger is another one that I commonly use. And really that's so that I can customize claims or attributes in the tokens that are issued by this particular service. And it also allows you to customize some stuff around IAM roles that are assigned to that particular session. Really, once you start working with Cognito out of the box, typically I find all of the fun stuff happens with the integration with serverless. So likewise, I normally recommend people don't start purely with Cognito, like try and get a bit of an overview of serverless, Lambda and integration with Lambda and stuff like that, because you'll really need that experience when you're starting to sort of extend or integrate with Cognito. One of the call-outs that I normally raise with everyone is that I work with is those triggers are synchronous and they're a part of the authentication process or the token generation process. So it's good to understand that they have you have basically 5 seconds to resolve or integrate with whatever you're integrating with. So most of the integration will use like services like step functions or SNS to sort of dispatch out. And really these sorts of things, hopefully they just basically give you something. If you remember one thing, it's that 5 second timer, because it's a bit frustrating. You can set whatever time you want on those Lambdas, but you've got 5 seconds to handle the request. If you want to apply or onboard something external to the pool during sign up, basically the sign up process for a user involves the normal flow of you basically register and then you get an email and you validate your email. You've probably got 30 seconds to do that. So if you kick off a step function, you've got 30 seconds to initiate or dispatch to basically set up whatever you want for that particular tenancy or customer. And lots of systems, rather than blocking the user, you can basically just put that off in a background job system like step functions. And then when they've got through all that process, they go into your web application and you can present them with whatever tenancy that they need access to within your product. Also, a call out to GitHub. There's lots and lots of good examples of these triggers and stuff like that. And Amplify, which I'll mention a bit more, dive into a bit more, is a great place to investigate how the creative methods they use to integrate with Cognito. So on the side of managing Cognito pools, so really the core of Cognito or the core function sort of in the basic area of Cognito and Cognito pools is basically managing self-service sign-up and all of the things that go around sign-up. So user signs up, we basically have the ability to change and recover passwords, set up an MFA, basically configure any of those particular settings around a user, as well as providing sign-in and sign-out and stuff like that. There are a couple of AWS CLI commands that we use a lot when we're basically interacting with or working with Cognito. And these two, the ability, this admin create user and admin confirm sign up, basically there's a whole raft of things they do. So it's well worth going through that documentation. If you're running it in production, you'll need to know and need to use these basically to do things like change people's email addresses, change their name, attributes, whatever it is that they want to change under their account. You're going to do, if you're just starting out, manually using these AWS CLI commands. And hopefully later you can automate them using basically the AWS APIs. So managing Cognito can be a bit of a challenge. So there are CloudWatch metrics, but it isn't one of the best services for visibility. So it has successful and failed login attempts and a range of other metrics. But from a monitoring perspective, the Lambda triggers are pretty much your go-to for monitoring signups and signups and other interactions with the pool. And in my case, working commercially, I would normally emit those to EventBridge as well, because there is no integration into Cognito at the moment for EventBridge. And that allows you to kick off any sort of monitoring or audit that you want in the background. And there's no authentication logs, like there's no failed authentication detail or anything like that at this time. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get something soon. And there's no inbuilt backup as well. Although it's resilient within a region, you have to do a certain amount of integration to get it to basically work across a couple of regions. And that's, there's documentation and there's a lot of open source projects around that. So you can basically pour upon that. GitHub for the win again. So getting started with web or mobile and using Cognito, I 100% recommend starting out. If you haven't done this before or haven't used this product before, basically give Amplify a shot. It's basically a service to get started quickly with Cognito. And myself, a couple of years ago, I actually used the precursor to it, which was AWS Mobile something, Mobile Hub. Basically just to bootstrap and get sort of familiar with how you use Cognito, just for basically setting up pools, setting up the process, and even interacting with the APIs as a web and mobile dev can be quite challenging initially. So as with all things, don't just use it as a black box. Basically, I used it to generate a bunch of projects and then literally tore them apart and just tried to figure out how they worked. And I used that process a lot because the Amplify team is doing a lot of good work. They're quite a large team, and they are basically working closely with Cognito and a range of different product teams. So there's a whole load of little gems that fall out of their open source projects. So definitely keep an eye on that product. So if you're building out a website, you'll typically be using something like Amplify.js. I use this for a lot of different web applications. It simplifies the whole sign in, sign up, sign out process, as well as a range of different interactions, which you change password, setting up MFA, all that sort of stuff. So I've included a couple of links. It's well worth diving into some of these examples. And I have a website which is basically using Cognito and Vue.js as well as good old Bootstrap. And that kind of illustrates, I tried to reduce that to just the core interactions. So it's pretty simple to read and start with, rather than what you would probably end up in a large product, which is a lot more complicated. So it's a good starting point for people. And I use that to introduce people to Cognito from the website. So one of the things that I'll probably just touch on briefly is, what about multi-tenant applications? So this is sort of situations where you want to extend Cognito and basically allow a customer to invite other users and provide that ability to have multiple tenants within the same user pool. This is an area where it really is quite complicated. There's a lot of security constraints and stuff like that. So there's actually a really, really good article just recently posted by the Burning Monk about running Amazon Cognito multi-tenant applications. Well worth having a bit of a read. it would take a lot of slides for me to explain all the detail around multi-tenant operation in Cognito. And really all I'm trying to do is just give you a bit of an overview. So definitely dive into that, have a bit of a look. He's got some really great content around serverless and AppSync as well. So multi-tenancy in Cognito can be done multiple ways. There's a section on the Cognito docs page, which basically has just been added around this. But yeah, you can pretty much have, in classic Amazon sites, you can basically just create more resources. So you can create a pool per tenant and put all the users in there. You can create an application client per tenant. That's a bit more advanced. And creating a group per tenant, I haven't used yet. The one that I typically gravitate towards is just using a custom attribute. And multi-tenancy with a custom attribute, it's just basically like having a user table where one of the attributes is a tenant ID. So you have the same tenant ID as all of the other users associated with your tenancy, and basically that is used to filter database records or resources that you're accessing. There are a few sort of interesting challenges around how Cognito secures data, and especially during sign-up. So that article by the Burning Monk raises a couple of those points. But needless to say, it's probably not something I would start with out of the box. I would use something like Amplify to sort of get familiar with how it all works, and then use some of the patterns they've got in Amplify. Basically doing multi-tenancy is a lot more complicated. And you can use, because Cognito has groups, you can basically set up an admin group, a super user group, a read-only group, and then basically use groups for your roles and the tenant ID for partitioning of data. Basically, one of the challenges that you'll have with Cognito is, like any other user store, typically, is the login needs to be unique, or the username needs to be unique. So if you use email as the login, that user will only be able to be present in one tenancy at one time. So for normal users, that's fine. But if you've got consultants that work for multiple tenancies or work across multiple clients, that can be a bit of a pain. So it's something I always call out. Just be careful with unique constraints. Just like database development, just keep that in mind. And you have to be very careful with the standard sign-up process provided by the pool, as during sign-up, any custom attributes can be edited by the sign-up process unless they're marked as development only or developer only. So just be very careful. Follow some of the examples online and basically do your homework around this. And you typically, if you're going to use the basic attributes, then it's simpler to focus on using the admin APIs to provision and manage the users like you would normally. So you basically build a bunch of infrastructure or APIs to onboard and offboard users and stuff like that. But yeah, password reset and TOTP can be a bit of a pain because you don't really want to be handling that data. There are ways to integrate that, but it is a little bit of a challenge. So really, in closing, really, I've just tried to give you some anecdotes, some high-level observations around Cognito and this, as well as a bunch of different links. I think Cognito, the value of Cognito is really that security. They do a very, very good job of maintaining and operating a service under interesting constraints, especially internet-facing, all that sort of stuff. And it really takes a load off your shoulders and a whole lot of stress. There's a lot of good open source around Cognito, especially in the Amplify area. They've got a lot of good code that you can dig into. And that was one of the reasons why originally I avoided Cognito, and then the Amplify tools and open source projects come online, and it just demystified a lot of the APIs and gave me a window into what was happening under the bonnet. So kudos to them. basically integrating with this service can be a bit of a challenge, but being woken up at 2 a.m. because people are bashing the crap out of an API is also something that you have to keep in mind. So it's nice to delegate this to someone else. So that's pretty much it. Truly just try to give you a bit of an overview and a few hints and tips. Hopefully that has helped people. I'll definitely post these slides online just so that you've got access to all the links and stuff like that. Thank you very much for watching.
Cool. Thank you very much, Mark. That was really informative. It has been a while, I will admit, since I last looked at Cognito. And even then it was mostly used not so much for user management as it was for the baseline, anonymous access to resources, and then to step them up into like tagging them against a logged in credential, but it wasn't actually involving any sort of user management or anything like that. That part of Cognito kind of scared me a little bit, to be honest.
It has improved a lot, and I had the same concerns when I started out using it, and really Amplify and just the simplicity and the abstraction really just opened it up so I could quickly get started with a web application and be confident that they were controlling that stuff. And I like the fact that certainly at the moment there seems to be a good focus on identity at Amazon. And they have quite a few people sort of coming out into the community and helping out as well. And that's another thing that the Amplify team's been doing a lot, but it's good to see more specialists from Amazon also sort of backing them up and providing more insights into that overall product range.
Yeah, just a reminder to everybody watching, this is your perfect chance to ask Mark any tough questions you might have kept lying around about Cognito or anything you've got. Let's really put him on the spot. But so I guess the Amplify change is probably the big one in this space, since they've started doing a lot of work around this. Is that where you would recommend a lot of people go for all that sort of insight? Do you recommend starting with their sample projects or more digging into what they're doing?
To be honest, if you can get started with Amplify and it does what you need to do to get running, I would 100% recommend just get running. The commercial side of me and the startup person in me says, if something works, just get going. And then, personally, I just like to peel back the layers as we want, to extend things or learn things. And the open source around that Amplify project is super helpful.
Yep.
And that's really where I got my start, because a lot of the APIs were quite complicated because they're very security conscious, Cognito team. And Amplify just, basically allowed me to dig in as I wanted, as opposed to being forced to dig in all the way when I started out. So
just like dipping your toes in the water instead of jumping in the deep end straight away. You can immerse yourself
and I was able to demo something straight away, which is super helpful. Like, there's nothing more demoralizing than spending a couple of weeks trying to get something working and having to raise tickets and ask questions because you just can't find the info. Whereas, basically launching a web application and going, wow, this isn't too bad, and people responding to GitHub tickets and helping you out, super helpful.
Yeah, there was one of your slides in the middle of the deck there that just listed all of the terms you need to, all the different concepts inside Cognito. And so having that as your day one, trying to memorize all of these new terms before you can even start, writing any code is always a big barrier to entry.
Yeah, very much so. Especially when you're onboarding developers to a team as well, the last thing you want to do is here's these 400 terms that you need to know. It's good being able to say, look, just give this project a go, get some wins, get some things going, and then we'll peel back the layers as you need. And there's a lot of good resources for that jargon and those terms, but it does take a while to get used to it.
Yeah, you don't want to overload yourself on the first day.
No.
How difficult would you say it is to peel back the layers from Amplify into Cognito?
So the Amplify code base is actually very well written. And they've done a lot of work answering questions, and there's a lot of is actually a lot of tickets related to Cognito on their GitHub. So not only do they have, because there's no GitHub for Cognito,
Yep.
so there's a lot of good discussion around sort of some of the caveats around how things work and how to configure things. So like any open source project, those bugs on that Amplify.js project were also a great way to get a foot in the door as far as, okay, that's why they're doing it, or that's how it works. I've seen that with a lot of the Amazon projects where they've got a GitHub presence. There's a whole discussion around related products and stuff like that, which is super helpful. So even if you just want to dip your toes in, even just having a bit of a look through the GitHub tickets, having a look at what's popular, what people are running into on that project, there's normally, Cognito being a fairly complicated service, there's normally a few tickets floating around for it.
Yeah.
And they give you a good insight into what's happening and links to PRs and changes and updates.
Cool.
And that's basically one of the ways that I got started with it.
Yeah, it's always good when that sort of discussion happens in the open rather than behind closed doors.
Yeah,
For when you come along later on.
Yeah, the message for the Amplify team and any team in Amazon is doing it out in the open just opens the door to a whole range of different developers who wouldn't have got through that first layer of stress getting things going.
Yep, couldn't agree more with that. All right, so it doesn't look like anybody had any questions. I guess that means that you just explained it so well that there were no questions that came through. That's usually how it goes in my experience. But just in case people maybe aren't comfortable asking questions or anything like that, will you be around on Slack for a little while or on the YouTube channel in case anybody wants to post anything? Cool.
As soon as I get out of here, I'll sign up for Slack. So I haven't joined that team, so
cool.
I have a lot of teams, but not that one.
And you said you'd post the slides too, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, there's a lot of good links in those, so it looks like it'll be a great resource.
Yeah, no worries at all. Thank you.
All right, so let's switch back to see who our next presenter is. Thank you very much, Mark. Okay. So our next presenter is, let me bring my notes up again, is Tony Horwath, who has a great .NET application ECS Fargate AWS SDK nightmare that I'm going to have to pay very close attention to because I don't understand half of what is written on their screen now, and I've been doing this for a long time, so this is going to be a good one. Tony, if you could share your screen there for me. While we does that, I'll give you a bit of background for Tony. He's a DevOps engineer with a passion for automation, a connoisseur of dad jokes, and he lives in central Gippsland between 90 Mile Beach and the Gippsland Lakes. A beautiful area out that way. He's providing a platform for the next generation by running the Wellington Shire Code Club. And I hear there's a few more other things that he's running coming up in the future, which also look very interesting. All right, so Tony has shared his screen. Let's switch over straight away. Here comes Tony.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for the introduction. As I said, I'm Tony. I'm the Gippy Geek, and I'm just sort of going to throw around a few terms that I'm sort of coming across at the moment on a few client sites. One of those is migrating a .NET Core application to AWS Fargate, which is kind of like the first step into a containerized workload, which we're recommending at the moment for this client, as well as some internal projects I'm doing as well. So some of the tooling that we're using in this is we've got the AWS Porting Assistant for .NET, which is a really good little tool, which gives you a bit of an insight and assistance when you want to port from a .NET framework to .NET Core, which is really the step that you really do need to get into AWS Fargate. I'll also post these information and this little blog I'm working on at the moment. So the porting assistant itself is basically, it will run through and it does a scan of the .NET framework, application, and it finds the APIs and NuGet packages that are incompatible with .NET Core. It then pushes out an assessment report, and from there it generates a compatibility and assessment as to what NuGet package you'll have to upgrade or which ones you need to look at replacing, and gives some recommendations on that as well. And it does give some form of assisted porting and updating your packages, but it really is quite an in-depth tool. That's another talk. I didn't have enough time to prepare for that sort of talk, but look forward to sort of opening up discussions later on with the user group if it's something that people want to see. The other tooling that I use for this this project is the AWS CDK. I don't think I'll ever go back to CloudFormation again. It's been quite an eye-opener, and the languages that are available, Python. I'm actually working in TypeScript. It's got Java as well as .NET, and it's got a really good examples library, and it's continuously changing. I've been working in the CDK now for about 4 months, and when I started, it was about 1.6 was the version, and we're already up to 1.95 in March 2021. So why did we sort of choose Fargate? It's a serverless compute engine with parameters on ECS, and there's also Amazon EKS. I've worked in Kubernetes as well as in other projects, and this is sort of like I said, the gateway into a containerized workload. We chose AWS Fargate. It's very low operational head, and it can get you up and running quite easy. So it's basically, I suppose, our amplified version there, Mark, in regards to AWS Fargate. So the other reason that Fargate only supports Linux, so therefore .NET Framework won't work in there, but you'd have to, again, upgrade to .NET Core. So why didn't I choose Lambda? Well, the reason being is some of your .NET Core apps do have a high reliance on Microsoft SQL Server, and currently AWS RDS Proxy doesn't support SQL Server, which means it wouldn't solve the problem that we're trying to do, and that sort of make these a bit more resilience in this application state. So we chose AWS Fargate. We didn't choose EKS because what we're finding is that the maturity and Kubernetes does come with a lot of additional complexity as well as additional costs associated with it compared to Fargate. So, and there was no portability requirements exist if we were to move this away to a different broader Kubernetes system, or if it was going to be self-hosted as well. So how we're storing our images is using Amazon ECR, the Elastic Container Registry, and so it's a full managed Docker container registry, similar to your Docker Hub, and going from there. And Amazon ECR also eliminates that cost to operate your own container repository, and worry about the scaling and underlying infrastructure as well. I do have quite a long list of references, which I sort of used to sort of put together this little quick demo. Open sourcing the porting system is a great article. How to use the tool, hosting ASP.NET Core applications, migrating tips and tricks as well, and a whole thing on modernizing it, as well as the whole AWS sample gateway. Again, I'll make these available later in the week. So I've got a little demo that I've sort of put together, and it's using a little MVC web app with an Nginx reverse proxy, and deploying that to using the AWS CDK. We can also run this locally to sort of show you what we've got running here. So I'm just going to bring this up a bit, just to show you what we're expecting and where we go from there. So just do a quick build of my applications. So it's using the Docker file itself is actually using we've got the Nginx one there, and then we've also got the reverse proxy one as well. So we're actually grabbing a Microsoft.NET Core SDK with a 3.1 based on the Focal Ubuntu build. And basically, I'm just going to copy those projects across and then utilize those to going forward. fix this screen up. Okay, so we've got our images there now. So if I was to just to run this locally, and I can then show you that what we should see. So on my local host here, we should see a nice little MVC application. I added a dual bit comic next, so it's just a whole lot of white space. Okay, so the differences that we have to do to make this work in a reverse proxies, in deployment to AWS, is that we have to modify the Nginx file because it doesn't understand what the my MVC web is, and because we're putting this into the same cluster, what I do have to do is just modify the local host again, and then what I do hit next is I then just rebuild the container itself and tag it ready to be pushed up into the ECR. What I'll do next is I'll just build, like I could tag to be pushing up into my repository. Okay, so the next thing I have to do, I do have to actually log in to AWS ECR to be able to push up my containers. And that's good. Now, at the moment, I actually don't have any place for my repos to live. So what I'm going to do is actually bring that up. So just show you here that there is no .NET ECR, but using the CDK, it is quite simple on bringing that to life. So what I'll do here is I'll just bring up the image repo. So in a matter of a few lines, I can then create using the CDK, I can bring up the different classes here. So here I'm setting the repo for my MVC, and then I'm then tagging it as well and outputting the results I need so I can come back to it and reuse it. And here's my Fargate stack as well. So what I'll do now is I'll just rebuild that and I'll create the CDK. Again, so what the CDK does, it then takes that TypeScript and compiles it into a JavaScript, utilizing JavaScript, and then it creates a CloudFormation template. I come over here to our CloudFormation stacks. You can then see that the .NET Fargate repo is starting to be created. I have used the benefit of TypeScript as well to create an array. So if there's a few different repos I want to do, I can then just pass in through some variables and parameters to say this is what I expect it to come out as, and then loop through those. I can create a whole list of repos that are required. So here I'm actually creating two repos. The two repos I'm creating is the one for my MVC and one for my repo. Just do a refresh, and there we go. So it's now completed. I do now have the information I need for my repo. So now I'm going to push through and push my images up into that repository. And we come back over here, I do a refresh. I got my two repos, and there is no images in here at the moment. So let's push these up. That's how I should have advised that I've now got 270 megabits throughput. We'll see how we go. While it's doing this deployment of the .NET Fargate stack itself, which consists of the Nginx reverse proxy and the actually the MVC.NET Core app. So in here, I'm just going to deploy it. Have I dropped off? No, here we go. Yeah, I'm back again now. Sorry about that. The push took a bit. So we've got a differential here. So this is actually going to show me what I'm going to be pushing up. Okay. And then we can now see. Okay. Might just stop and restart the screen share. Yeah. Share screen. How's that looking? Yeah, Skype sort of there we go. So I got one container image pushed up, and we can actually see here that with the IAM, all the changes that CDK is going to do, and it's then asking me to approve these to go ahead. So we're now deploying that stack. And there we go. So the Fargate stack's now coming up. You don't really need to have the CloudFormation window open. I'd like to show for those who haven't sort of done any other sort of deployments using CloudFormation in some sense. So I do get a nice little progress information here in the console as well. I'm a bit weary now pushing these images up again without losing everyone. So I'll do the next one. Hold on to your hats. So let me know if I drop out again. So everything I'm sort of creating in the stack, we will see if I'm creating an ELB or an ALB.
So while we wait for Tony's push to finish and for him to come back again, don't forget that we've got the poll running on Slack regarding in-person events again. And the link for Slack is melb.awsug.org.au/Slack. Looks like Tony's back now, so let's switch him back over.
I'm back on again. Okay. All right, this was working well, and the demo gods are not kind to me at the moment. I'll just give that push a little bit longer. Okay. All right. That's the best thing. It's probably the best part. But we just I do have a few dad jokes, but I'm not too sure if I'll be allowed to say those as well. Okay. I'm just trying to just push the community. It's almost screen sharing's come back. Nice. I ran this about 4 or 5 times this afternoon, and it worked a charm. So now 10 to 8, so maybe all the gamers in my area are now pushing their limits on Sea of Thieves. We're almost there. There we go. So those containers are now, those Docker images, I should say, have now been pushed in. I'm just going to reload this. There we go. So I probably should have done some shaping before I jumped on. So what we're seeing at the moment, so I've got the images up, but what I'm waiting for now is this stack to come up. So we've got, I'll just recap on what we've got. We've now got our image here for the MVC. I've also now got in my repository a reverse proxy as well. And we should start to see this container to start coming up. So here we go now. So I've got my .NET Fargate demo container. Inside this .NET demo container, we will have the service, the tasks, okay, and then this task will also then show us the 2 actual containers we've got here. So the 2 containers we have are in fact our MVC and our reverse proxy, okay. So the next thing that we will do is we'll actually wait for the ALB to come up. So when the CloudFormation is finished, so in here I should now receive the actual web address from the ALB. And come across here, this was our local host. I'll create a new tab. And there we go. So we'll just quickly and easily just push through a .NET Core application utilizing the CDK and pushing that into ECR, and then AWS Fargate services now controlling that and supplying that to the general public. So that's really it in a nutshell. Like I said, this was a quick internal demo I did, a quick lightning talk. And so I'll just leave it there. If there's any questions, I'm looking at publishing and talking soon about the AWS CDK and the benefits that I've found and come across. So stay tuned, and I'll update you all when that's ready to be distributed.
No, I'm not muted anymore, and I look less silly. Cool. Thanks, Tony. That was a good talk. I always love seeing Fargate in actual use. So how did while we are waiting for people to ask all the hard questions, I'll just jump in the meantime. And was there anything about this setup that you didn't like? So obviously you said you love CDK now, and you learned presumably a lot of other things with this, but anything that didn't work as well as you hoped?
Yeah, I suppose when I first started playing around with, especially the porting assistant, how that's matured in the last 3 to 4 months, and it's now open source as well. So there's a lot more contributors in trying to move a lot of this .NET EC2 IIS workloads into containers. So initially that was a bit of a pain point in getting my head around that. But now the documentation has caught up with the application. A lot of it was point and click and trying to find what it was trying to do, and there's not much documentation on how to set it up. If you do need to have an AWS account with the correct roles to then talk to the porting assistant back end as well. So that was probably the biggest pain point. The next part of the pain point for me was with the CDK is that I've been in Go world for quite a fair bit, and just getting my head back around into JavaScript and the CDK as well. And also watching that mature as well in the last 6 months, in the sense of where there was some modules that weren't available for you to bring your stacks up or revert back to using custom resources or making your own CloudFormation templates and injecting that JSON as well. One thing I do quite like about it is actually the reuse of CloudFormation exports. So once you've got your base VPC and your subnets, reusing that information as well, it certainly makes the CDK quite easy to deploy and redeploy into your different accounts and regions as well.
Cool. It seems like everybody was so impressed with your demo that they don't even have any questions. So I think all we can do now then is just thank you very much.
Well, they're following along, and they're actually pushing their containers up at the moment as well.
That's very possible. Yep.
Yeah. No problem. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you. Rob, back to you.
Thanks, Ian. I so wasn't paying attention, so now you get to see all the camera artifacts on my camera until it actually turns off the display. Come on, turn off. All right, thank you very much, Tony. That was really good. I still haven't actually used the CDK properly myself yet, and it's on my growing backlog of things that I actually need to investigate and learn how to use properly. So I really appreciate that demo. It does actually look a lot better than CloudFormation. So that's always a good sign, because CloudFormation is always a verbose friend. Still waiting for these artifacts to disappear. Anyway. Alright, let's wrap it up there. We don't have to worry about those. Okay, so our next event is on Wednesday the 28th of April. Keep an eye out for what the plan will be with this. Maybe in person, it may not be. I think honestly, who knows with COVID, regardless of what we choose to do, everything could change tomorrow anyway. But we will follow up. Don't forget, there's a plug then for the poll that's in Slack. There is a poll in Slack in the general channel, just as to whether you'd be keen to re-attend any in-person events if we do start them up again. We're just trying to get a handle on how many people would actually be interested in going, because if nobody really wants to attend any events, that saves me a lot of effort of having to go and try and talk to a venue and and get catering and everything organized. So if you are keen to go, definitely drop us a line in the poll. Thank you very much to Mark and Tony for your presentations tonight, and to Guy for helping out with the news. I know it's been a bit of a quieter night tonight, but we do generally get a lot of people watching this on delay. Maybe after they've all gone away for the long weekend already. Either way, thanks very much for your presentations. Thanks everybody for their input. And thank you again to our sponsors again, Enabler, AC3, CMD, and Do It International for their continued support throughout this year. And now we go to the virtual pub. I'll post a link to a social Zoom event into Slack in just a minute. So if you're interested in hanging around and having a chat with Ian and myself and any of the other regulars, and I'll see if I can convince our presenters to hang around for a bit longer. But we'll see you there. Otherwise, we'll see you next month in whatever form that takes. Thanks, everyone.